Welcome to the Need2Know Comedy Show with me, Ronan McManus. Today we're joined by a comedian who not only makes you laugh, but also makes you think. As a political activist, she's all about helping people from underprivileged backgrounds, tackling mental health issues, and freeing nipples. This is Samantha Pressdee. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Yes. I'm very well, So how have you been coping with the last sort of few months of lockdown?
Too well. I'm scaring myself, actually. I really enjoyed it. But I know I was an introvert. But yeah, I feel I'm maybe too much of a social hermit, because in the beginning I was really sad about everything that was happening. You know, I was crying, I was watching the news, I was crying. But then I had to come to an acceptance that, you know, you're powerless really to do anything here. You're just one of many people in the same boat. So I asked the Archangel Michael to cut my energy cord to the mainstream media. And then I just got back to being creative. I thought, well, what can I do to put stuff out in the world? So I made this joke dating profile, and people really liked it. They were saying really kind things on Facebook and sharing it. So I thought, okay, I'll do that then. So I've been creating a comedy series on social media, which has been really fun and given me a sense of purpose at this time.
Lockdown series, is that right?
Yes, it's called Love in Lockdown, and it's about trying to find a husband, which I'm not really trying to do. I was planning to date in April, and there's been this big build-up. People were saying to me, "Oh, Sammy, when are you going to start dating again?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to start dating in April." And then I'm like, "Oh, it can't." So I just wrote this show, and this character emerged that's kind of desperate to find a husband. So yeah, it's fun.
What I loved about it, I've been watching your YouTube videos and watching that series in particular. And I love the fact that, in much the same way Ricky Gervais's David Brent character, at times you're not quite sure whether it's a character, whether it's real. It's kind of really brilliant. It's just the way that it's done. You sort of, at first I thought, oh, this is a character. And I thought, is it? Hang on a sec. So I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I think with comedy, we're kind of turning up different parts of our personality. And I am known for being slightly aggressive, but I own that trait in myself, because that is what makes me kind of an activist. If I wasn't slightly aggressive, I wouldn't have the courage to stand up for what I believe is right. I would just shy away. So I own that I can be slightly aggressive. But in this series, that's turned right up, and she's like looking for this man that doesn't think for himself, and she wants to control him, and she's found someone in America, and she's thinking, "Ooh, spousal visa," which is it's not me at all. Like, I would never start a relationship with someone for what they could give me. I'm very spiritual. I want connection, and I believe in soulmates and stuff like that. So it's like really turned up the insecurity that I probably have within myself, but it's not a true reflection of who I am.
So let's go back to the start. So what age did you know you wanted to become a comedian, and why? How did you know that?
I always wanted to be an actress since I was a little girl. I was about 3 years old, and I said to my mother, we used to watch Home and Away, and there was a girl, Sally, in Home and Away that was about my age. And I would say to my mom, "How do I get in the telly? I want to be in the telly like Sally." And looking back, I feel probably I just wanted my mother's attention, because she was giving lots of attention to the TV. And as a child, I'm thinking the TV is more interesting than me, so I need to get inside the TV. So I think that kind of drove my desire to be an actress. And I didn't know that much about comedy until about seven years ago. Yeah, 7 years ago. I'd gone to the Edinburgh Fringe with a show. It was a play that I was in as an actress, and I got to see some comedians, and it kind of opened up this whole new world to me. I went along to see my cousin. My cousin is Mark Thomas. So that was really inspiring, and I went to one of his protests at that time. I think 2013, we were protesting about abuse of LGBT people in Russia. So there was a big protest outside the Russian concierge. So that kind of got me into activism. That was probably the first protest that I'd ever been on. And I was inspired by his show. Another comedian I got to see was Alfred Brown, and I was really inspired by him. He reminded me a little bit about Russell Brand. And I was already a fan of Russell because he's quite airy-fairy, and I am too. I saw someone called Rosie Wilby. And with all three of these comedians, they weren't just telling jokes, they weren't just trying to entertain people, they were expressing something that I thought was truthful and important. And the way that they were telling their jokes wasn't just to entertain people, to distract them from the world. It was designed to make them think about the world. And that is what made me want to be a comedian. I thought, right, so I can be an actress, I can tell other people's stories, but if I become a comedian, I can tell my own stories. So the freedom of that really, really sparked my interest.
So that was more stand-up based then, rather than, because obviously I've seen your character based stuff on YouTube, but this was more drawing you to stand up.
Yes, stand-up comedy. That's mostly what I have been doing for the last nearly 7 years. Yeah.
So do you get nervous before a show, or how do you cope with that?
I used to. The first time I ever went on stage as a comedian, I had 3 glasses of wine and I was still shaking like a leaf. But then maybe a couple of years in, after having a few what we call deaths on stage, and I had a bad review for my first show, that kind of toughened me up and got me to sort of into the place where I had to detach from what other people think and realize I just have to focus on the people that do like it. It's not for everyone. I'm not writing something that I want everyone to like. I'm looking for my tribe. So once I sort of thought of it like that, from, I guess, a more humble perspective, I didn't get nervous anymore.
Myself by trade, and I find it quite hard sometimes on the stage. I always tend to focus on the people that are maybe not getting into it as much, because you want to get everybody in the room. But I can totally relate to that feeling of dealing it in that way. So do you get heckles, and how do you deal with hecklers?
Not so well. The last time I got heckled, I was doing a club gig, and I'm not really a club comic, and I don't know if I want to be a club comic, to be honest. Like, I respect club comedians, and I think it's a great way to get better at the craft of writing jokes, but I don't necessarily think there's any artistic merit in entertaining people on a Saturday night as opposed to an hour show that's really heartfelt. I prefer that kind of stuff. But the last time I got heckled, I was doing a club gig. I was about less than 2 minutes in, maybe not even a minute in. It was a small little village town, completely white, probably Tory, which, you know, I don't mind Tories, but it's not like really where my views align. And someone shouted out, "Tits!" And I just froze. Now, if that was my show and my audience, I would have felt so much more confident in tackling that. Like, maybe this show isn't for you. There's plenty of other shows. Go and see another show. But because I'm kind of being paid to make these people feel happy on a Saturday night, it just like threw me. So I'm still working on trying to how to deal with that. And I do put myself in those situations where I am going to be challenged, because I think it's going to keep me fresh, it's going to make me better. But I don't know, there's also something about women being aggressive. Like, people don't like it. You could see a man rip a heckler to shreds and think, cool, he's a badass. But if a woman does it, it's like, that's not very ladylike. Oh, she's swearing. There's still a lot of sexism, I feel, in the comedy world.
So do you write all your own material? Yes,
every bit of it, yeah.
And do you write often? Do you set yourself tasks and do it that way, or are you just kind of constantly writing? How do you work in that way?
I feel like it's still an evolving process. When I wrote my first show, that was kind of grown from just trying stuff out at open mics. Like, I do open mics and I do a different 10 minutes every time, cut stuff that didn't work, and then put it all together. But I wouldn't put too much sort of effort into the writing before I went on stage. I'd just go on stage and see what's funny. Now I get like a joke writing exercise. I'll choose like 3 topics. So I'm going to write a 5-minute routine. I'll choose like 3 topics. I'll do some joke writing on the 3 topics, but I'll also do 3 pages free write on each of the topics, and then read it out, underline anything that I think is funny or interesting, and then construct it into a script. And that can be constantly changing until, like, the only time my comedy is finished is if I put it into a show. And sometimes it's still not finished because the same joke may evolve and then go into the next show because it's slightly different. So yeah, it's an evolving process, and I'm trying to get into a routine where I'm writing at least a couple of mornings a week for ever.
Yeah, because I find that I'm a musician, I write songs, and I sort of find when I try to set myself a task, it's often counterproductive, and I kind of, things just kind of come. It's always easy when it's sort of just comes to me at times. I don't know whether you find that does the task thing, it does help you to do it. You find that's a productive way of working.
Yeah, I get stuff that way, but I also feel like sometimes I just randomly download jokes from the universe. It's like something will pop into my head and I'll be like, that's funny, and I'll write it in my comedy book. Or it may be that I say something in a conversation and I'm not trying to be funny, but someone cracks up, so I'll write that down. So they come from all different kinds of places, the words that I put into my routines.
Yeah, and so the open mic thing, I mean, what's that like? It must be pretty nerve-wracking to get up in the middle of a room of people that don't know who you are, and just doing. Is it kind of putting yourself out there? What's that like to do that?
I found it quite hostile, if I'm completely honest. Where I live, there's a lot of I'm gonna sound like a social justice warrior right now, but there's a lot of straight white men on the comedy circuit here, and people say, it doesn't exist anymore, but especially in small towns outside of London, outside of big festivals like the Edinburgh Fringe, there are a lot of people that will see a woman come on stage and just be like, she's going to talk about periods. Like, it does exist. So you're, as a woman going up on stage, even at an open mic night, you're already kind of at a disadvantage. And I've heard some Asian comics say the same thing, that people will be like, he's just going to talk about racists. They feel like they're being lectured to, but it's just a different perspective that they haven't heard, because comedy is mostly men. It just is. So the audiences tend to reflect the views that they're hearing the most. So I do feel like I'm at a disadvantage if I'm just going up in front of a bunch of random people. But there's a positive side to that too, in that 2 or 3 of those random people might come up to me after and say, wow, I really loved your stuff, and they want to connect with me and they want to tell me their stories, and then they may end up following me on social media and actually coming to see a show. So I'm building my own community. I don't need this whole open mic community. And I started my own gig as well, but yeah, that was hard because it was also in a small town with a particular kind of people, and they wanted like non-PC jokes, which, is fine. I've got nothing against non-PC jokes, but it's not my thing. I want to say something, which is why I love the festivals. I love going to the Edinburgh Fringe, the Brighton Fringe, the Camden Fringe. I love festivals because people have read your poster, they've read your blog, they're coming to see you because they're interested in what you say you're going to talk about. You're not trying to convince anyone that you deserve to exist as a comedian because you have because you don't have a dick.
Well, I think, you see that on the sort of the panel shows and the sort of on the TV. They're really actively making sure they're trying to book more female comedians. It's a sort of running joke. You see that, but that the panel shows are also so sort of men orientated. But what can be done at grassroots level to sort of tackle that, or is it really just a societal problem?
A lot of women quit, which is sad. And I thought about quitting too, because, there is harassment, there is bullying. I've even had sexual assault on the comedy scene. So a lot of women just quit. They feel like, I can't be dealing with this. And I feel like we need to sort of recognize that and stand up for that. And I'm sure it's different in London, because I've always felt like a different kind of energy when I'm gigging in London. But in small towns where it's predominantly men running the circuit, and you know, they may feel comfortable introducing you to the stage by describing your tits, and then if you sort of even like say to them in private, look, I'm not comfortable with you doing that, they act like they're being victimized. So I feel like it's men that need to just stand up for these little microaggressions. They are microaggressions, and people will say, oh, you need a thick skin, you need to toughen up. We don't need to deal with abuse, whether it's subtle or overt. It's just not right.
No, I agree with that. Totally agree with that. And you mentioned you've been to Edinburgh a few times. So you went there as an actress doing a show. But have you been there? You've done your own shows as a comedian there. How did you find that?
The first one was a baptism of fire. I just threw myself into it, and I had this wacky show called Consume, Shit and Die, which was about consumerism and how I felt like consumerism had hijacked female sexuality, and we weren't allowed to own our sexuality. And at the end of it, I would rip my top off and be like, free the nipple. And the whole show culminated, whatever. It all ended in this big protest on the Royal Mile, which I didn't expect, you know, that would be a big thing. But I put up an event on Facebook. Loads of people said they were going to come. We ended up making all these national and even international headlines for doing this Free the Nipple rally on the Royal Mile. So I decided for the next show, I would talk exclusively about my sexuality, how it's felt to me as a woman trying to take ownership of my sexuality, my experiences. And that show was called Sextremist, which was performed topless. So that was the second show. The third show was called Back to Basics. That was about basic income. And my most recent show, Covered, is about mental health and how people are not getting their needs met, and some people are falling through the cracks. And now I'm doing something totally different with the series. But I feel like I need a break from activism. I'm a fighter. I'm definitely a fighter, but you've got to choose your battles, and you can't fight all the time.
We'll say it's obviously a drive. It's been a driving force in your life, and you've chosen sort of to mix that in with your comedy. Has that been a conscious choice to do that, to get the message across?
That's exactly why I wanted to be a comedian. You know, if I want to tell stories and entertain people, I can stick to acting. But the comedians that I saw that year in 2013, they were all challenging a grand narrative. You know, they were challenging the status quo and doing it in a funny way. And I think if you're going to put yourself up against something like that, you do need humor. Otherwise, you're just going to get bullied. I don't know if you've ever tried arguing with someone with a strong political perspective, but I
spent the last 3 years on Facebook talking Brexit. So I understand exactly. It is really tough to kind of fight the good fight sometimes.
So bringing a personal element into it, you know, I'm not asking them to change their opinion. I'm not asking them to vote a certain way. I'm asking them to try and find it within them to empathize with me, or empathize with this character in my show that I'm talking about. And I'm inviting them into a deeper conversation rather than you're right, I'm wrong, that kind of thing, whatever.
Yeah, I found that, like, I mean, I tried to do this with you know, we're talking on face it, rather than just people just want to hurl insults at each other. When you say, well, actually, can we actually start to talk about why you're doing what you're doing, why you think what you think, and let's try and actually open this up. I mean, we seem to be very sort of footballized right now, and everyone's got their team, so it's sort of like trying to break down those walls. So I mean, like I find with music, it's a good vehicle in the same way comedy, you know, to actually get people to start to feel something about something, you know. It must be really satisfying when you sort of get that feedback from people. Do you find that people talk to you and
Yeah, it's the best feeling in the world. And having people come up to me, I've had men come up to me in tears at the end of my show, hugging me because they've had a similar experience. That is real connection. That is something really beautiful. And you know, I don't know what their political standing is, and I don't care. But I know that we connect in that moment about that particular issue, whether it be addiction, whether it be mental health, whether it be women being victimized by men, or well, I don't talk about racism because I'm not black, it's not my place, but you know, those kind of issues, you're getting to a more human place. And like you're saying, if you try just arguing with someone that has a different political opinion, you're quite often just insulted. And at that point, they've lost the argument. I've tried that myself, like trying to get people to see things a different way, having respectful debate on the internet. Does that exist? Does respectful debate on the internet exist? Because I haven't seen it.
No, I don't think it does either. But so this brings us on to Love Muffin Productions. What is Love Muffin Productions?
It's a social enterprise which I started in 2016 when I was writing Sex Dreamist. I have quite a complex history, really. I was hospitalized in 2014 following the death of my dad, and diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And the journey to recovery, I got signed off again in 2015 around the December with a bout of anxiety, which was probably brought on by the stresses of being a woman in the comedy industry, to be fair. But I got signed off work with a bout of anxiety in 2015. And then the job centre wrote to me, as they do, and they said, "Oh, we see you're off sick. We're doing this pilot in your town, trying to get sick people back to work." And I'm sure some people would have opinions on that, but I thought, oh, whatever, I'll go in and I'll see what they can offer me, because I did want to get better. And they told me that I could apply for something called the New Enterprise Allowance. That was a grant to start my own business. I would be given a business mentor and potentially get a loan as well. And they also offered me support for my mental health with that in something that's called an Access to Work grant, which I still have to this day. I have someone that enables me to do a good job with my admin and complex things that sometimes I can't do if I'm feeling a little bit bipolar-y. I have someone to help me with that stuff. So they enabled me to start a business. And that is when Love Muffin Productions was born. And when I tried to get a business bank account, one bank account said, "I'm sorry, but we can't give you a bank account based on the name of your company." So there you go, everyday sexism.
I mean, love's a good thing. Muffins are good things. I don't see the issue. But you
Yeah.
do a lot of good things with that. You do a lot of good work with Love Muffin.
I've produced all of my own shows. I've produced 2 series of podcasts, Men, Sex and Feminism, and now pulling it together. I produced a booklet, which I would give out at the end of my shows in exchange for donations on I interviewed some comedians like Laura Lex, Juliet Burton, Dave Shawner wrote an article for me. So I just put some snippets of that into this little booklet, some resources, a little bit more about the show, the costumes, things like that. So it's a bit like a program, cross between a program and mental health resources that I would just give out at the end of my show. So we produced that. And now producing the series, and yeah, there's a lot. Like, I've done quite a lot since I started the business in 2016, and it's been successful. And I'm proud of that, because a lot of businesses will fail in the beginning, especially, you know, entertainment industry. And I'm living in the Midlands. I'm not near all the opportunities in London. So I'm proud of what I've done with Love Muffin.
So you should be. It's a fantastic thing. Well done. So what's been your biggest career highlight to date, would you say?
What has been my highlight? It's not necessarily, it is connected to the comedy, but it's not necessarily me doing comedy. I've been invited to share my views on radio stations like Talk Radio, and I was on George Galloway's TV show Sputnik. So to have that platform to share my message is what is important to me, because what I was saying back then, not a lot of people knew. I was telling the story of how when I became mentally unwell after the trauma of losing my dad, I reached out to the mental health services support. There was nothing for me, and it took for me to get critically unwell before I was given any kind of support from the state. And the support that I was offered was 2 nights in a police cell while I was in a psychosis, because there was no beds available on the NHS. And I wanted to put that out there, because if you treated someone with a physical disability or a physical illness, if someone broke their arm and they're like, oh, sorry, there's no beds available in the hospital, we're going to keep you in a police cell for a couple of days, people would be, out on the streets in an uproar. But there's an empathy gap between mental health problems and physical health. People can see a physical health complaint, but they can't see when someone might be behaving a little bit differently because they are mentally unwell. And I feel we need more compassion there, we need more empathy there. And I feel the way that we create that empathy is not through arguing on social media, but having a platform to share these views in a respectful way, where we're listened to. And comedy is one platform for that, but also to be invited onto platforms that are reaching potentially millions of people. That was a highlight for me, because essentially I just want to spread a message.
Well, I think the conversation has moved on a lot. I mean, I myself have suffered from depression and anxiety over the years, and it's something that I've been very open about on my social media and amongst my friends. And I made that decision to be open about it. And I think the conversation has moved on a lot, and it's in the last few years even. And so I think it's vital that people do have the platform, use it well, and can do something positive in this way, because it affects such a huge percentage of the population. This is definitely something that people need to do. And you've mentioned before your challenges with sort of sexism. So would you say that's been your biggest challenge in your career, being a woman in the industry, or is there been what other challenges have you faced?
I think also there's been challenges where I've called myself a feminist, and people have come to see me because I'm a feminist, but they may not share the same views as me as a feminist, and then I've been attacked for having the wrong views as a feminist, because there's a lot of nuanced opinions within feminism, as there should be, but there is sadly also a lot of infighting, and what we were talking about, people trying to impose what they think is right on other people in quite an aggressive way, and saying there's absolutely no room for debate here, you're either with us or against us. So that's kind of within, are you for sex workers or are you against them? And it's like you can't have a slightly nuanced opinion, or you're not with us. There's a lot of people like that, unfortunately, and that goes for any political cause, I would imagine. It's not exclusive to feminism. I mean, mental health, there's people that will advocate for the medical model, there's people that will advocate for the psychological model, and there are people that will aggressively fight for either, but we need both, essentially. So
what's next for you?
Who knows? What is next? I hope to get back on stage within the next year. I'm writing a new show, which is going to be a little bit more lighthearted, maybe apolitical, just about human experience. It's going to be about love, I think, talking about love. So yeah, I'm just on a mission. Love, truth, laughter. That's it.
This is the Need2Know Comedy Show. So do you have a recommendation of a comedian that people may not know, but they need to know?
Yes. Tom Mayhew. He did a show last year at the Edinburgh Fringe called Tom Mayhew, and it was about his experience as a working class man, being on benefits, and it's really important and a really funny show. And it got 4-star review in the Scotsman, 4-star review on Chortle, and I was amazed that it wasn't selling out, because most shows with those kind of reviews would. But the sad reality is that at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, a lot of the punters and a lot of the comedians are all middle class people, and I feel like that, you know, there's a lot of talk about, oh, we need to be socialists, we need to do this, we need to look after the oppressed. But I feel like a lot of them are just kind of playing the rescuer. And when you've got a man with an authentic experience that's saying something important, he should be elevated. He should be selling out at that festival. But he did go on to do a run at the Soho Theatre, and I hope he'll get to continue to spread the message that he is sharing within that show. But yeah, he's an excellent comedian and a very lovely person with a beautiful heart that just wants good things for people that may not get the best start in life.
So we'll make sure we put a link to him as well, because we'll put a link to all of your stuff as well into the description here. And we also should mention you mentioned earlier on your cousin Mark Thomas, who's a very talented, well-known comedian. So he's just fantastic. I'm a big fan of his, actually. So I just thought give him a quick mention near the end. But we will have all of your links to all of your stuff in the description, so people can find out more about you. And good luck with everything. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.